Hello, in this video I will show you how to create a box plot in Google Sheets. Box plots, just like histograms, are used to summarize the distribution of quantitative variables. But if histograms can be used with the raw data, box plots require some summarization of the data before we can actually create these charts with Google Sheets. This is because box plots rely on what we call the 5-number summary: the minimum value, the first quartile, the median, the third quartile, and the maximum value in the data set. In this data file, I have a list of all of the schools in the state of Georgia and the amounts of money that are spent per student in these schools. I have a total amount, I have federal amount, and a state amount. Because this data set is very large, it includes about 2,200 schools. I went ahead and aggregated the data using a pivot table, aggregated the data by school system. So this way it is a lot more manageable. So if you can look here in this second sheet where it says pivot table, I have a list of the school systems and then an average of the amount spent per student by school system, and I have the federal amount and then the state amount, and overall I have 219 data lines. Well, the first line is actually the header, so actually I have 218 school systems overall. And as I mentioned before, if I want to create a box plot to illustrate the distribution of these numbers, I have to first find some summary statistics. Specifically, for the box plot, I need the minimum, the lower quartile, the upper quartile, and the maximum values. And just to save some time, I've already typed these in here, but I'm going to just show you quickly how to calculate them. So for the minimum value for the federal amount, I can just type equal min, which is the function that yields the minimum value, and then I'm going to select the data range that I want, which is from B2 to B219. I have to be very careful not to include the grand total here, so only the values that correspond to school systems. And then I am going to close the parentheses and click enter. So this is my minimum value. I'm going to continue with the federal amount. So I am going to calculate the lower quartile. The lower quartile represents the point that is above or at the same level as the first or the lowest 25% of the data. So to find that point, I'm going to type equal and then quartile parenthesis. I have the same data range, which is between B2 and B219, and then comma. I have to specify here which quartile I want to obtain. So in this case, I want to get the first quartile, meaning the first or the lowest 25%, right? So I'm going to type 1 and then enter. So this is the value of the lower quartile. And then I am going to do something very similar to obtain the third quartile. So I'm going to type equal, again, quartile, parenthesis, B2, B219, which is my data range for the federal amount, comma, and then 3. I want to get the third quartile. The third quartile represents the point that is above or at the same level as 75% of the data. So I'm going to close the parentheses and then enter. And then for the maximum, I'm going to type equal max parentheses B2, B219, and close the parenthesis, enter. Okay, so now that I already have the federal amount, to obtain a box plot of this, I just have to select uh, the variable that I want to use, which will be printed at the bottom of the uh, x-axis, and then these values. Do not select the header row, it's not going to work. And then I'm going to click insert and then chart. And Google Sheets is automatically detecting the type of chart that is most appropriate for this type of data. In this case, it's correct. I want a box plot. And notice that my box plot doesn't really look like a box, it's more like a thick line. This is because my data are skewed. 50% of the data are located, or the middle 50% of the data are located in the box. The box represents the observations that are between the first quartile and the third quartile. The first whisker begins with the minimum value, and the second whisker, or the upper whisker, ends with the maximum value. And notice that we have some outliers here at the higher end because this whisker is much longer than the first one. And this is why the box doesn't really look like a box in this case. But let's do the same thing for the state amount, because the box plot, or the candlestick chart as it's called in Google Sheets, allows to illustrate several distributions side by side, just to be able to compare their location and spread. So let's do the same thing with the state amount. So the state amount is represented in column C. I'm going to type equal min and then parenthesis, and in this case I'm going to type C2 to C219 and enter, equal quartile, again C2 C219 comma 1, close the parenthesis, enter. And then third quartile, equal quartile, parenthesis, C2 C219 comma 3, close the parenthesis, enter. And then the maximum value, equal max, parenthesis, C2 C219, close the parenthesis, enter. So now that I have all these 5 values, all I have to do is edit the chart to include the state amount as well. So if I click on the chart, I can click on the upper corner where I see these dots, and then click on edit chart, and then see the data range here. It ranges from F3 to J3 right now, but since I added another row of data, I can change this array to J4 and then hit enter. Notice that now I have both box plots. Just by looking at this chart, I can see that the state amount has a much wider spread. It's also located on higher values. And there are some extreme observations at the higher end as well. Now, the nice thing about charts in Google Sheet is that you can share these charts. You can click again on the dots in the upper right corner, and you can publish your chart. And you have the options of obtaining a link that you can share with others, or you can embed the chart on a web page, for instance. So if you click publish, you're being asked if this you're sure you want to do this, and then you obtain a code that you can use to embed the chart on a web page, for instance. And if you chose the interactive option, that chart will update as your data are updated as well. Uh, let's close this window for now. But even if I keep my chart here, it's still nice because every time I make changes in my original data, for instance, I make some corrections here, or maybe I add new data in this data file, maybe data from more recent years, then my aggregated data in the pivot table will update, will change, and then my graph in my summary table here would automatically change as well.